So, as we all know, it's been quite a year. Last October, was the start of the federal crackdown on medical cannabis dispensaries, and lost in the shuffle was Governor Brown's veto of the industrial hemp bill. It's the third time this bill has been vetoed, and for me, as a cannabis attorney activist, it got me thinking about just what do we do now? We've passed laws in the state of California that the feds can pretty much ignore, and they are ignoring right now, and it's particularly in San Francisco. I'm from San Francisco. It's a very scary time. We're talking about opening back up the black market, further emboldening the cartels, and this panel, we have a diverse array of opinions, and they're going to present their perspectives on how they think the movement ought to step forward, chart a path forward to, I think what we could all agree on is eventually ending the 75 years of cannabis prohibition. Just last week and over the past month, there have been some interesting calls for legalization down in Central America. These substances are illegal controlled substances beyond cannabis, but including cannabis, are flowing through these nations. The demand is primarily in the United States, and President Obama, understandably, he's hedging his bets, but he says legalization isn't the answer, but he's open to the debate. So we're here to carry on the debate and really chart it forward. So introducing the panel, we have Bill Panzer. Many of you know him. He's a prominent criminal defense attorney in Northern California. He helped author Proposition 215. He's helped author an initiative that he'll tell us a little bit about, the Repeal Cannabis 2012, and perhaps something moving forward in 2014.
Repeal cannabis prohibition, not repeal cannabis.
Prohibition, there we go. Stevie DeAngelo sitting next to him. He's the founder of Harborside Health Center. Dan Rush sitting next to him. He's a, Special Operations Director of UFCW Local 5.
I'm the National Director of the Medical Cannabis and Hemp Division of UFCW International Union now.
Okay, well, we like that new title. And next to him is David Long with the Law Enforcement Against Prohibition. And guys, I'm going to stick with 10 minutes apiece. This is going to be a really lively discussion. We want to leave plenty of time for questions and answers. So, David, if you could lead us off and get the discussion going, we appreciate it.
Okay. Thank you. I'm happy to be here. My name is David Long. I'm with an organization called Law Enforcement Against Prohibition. I'm a recent addition as a speaker with that organization. That organization believes that the current war on drugs is a failure, and that prohibition should end, and all drugs should be legalized, and so they can be controlled and regulated. I can tell you a little bit about myself, since I'm sure none of you probably know me. I'm an attorney, and after some years after graduating from law school, I decided to become a federal agent. I was a federal agent from 1995 to 2003. I was primarily tasked with working non-drug related organized crime. I was with the Office of Labor Racketeering, which is a specialized unit within the United States Department of Labor.
Sorry,
there was a reason why you guys are sitting next to each other.
And
I'm over here.
So, as you can see, there's not a clear connection with drugs in that position. However, and for some years there wasn't for me. But I'll back up a little bit before I go into that. While I was in law school, I never thought LEAP didn't exist back in those days, but I never thought I'd be a part of an organization such as this. Back in law school, I had the opportunity to work one summer as an intern in the United States Attorney's Office in Philadelphia. And there, this was like 1989, during that time, crack cocaine was a big deal. And I had the opportunity to assist a DEA agent along with an assistant United States attorney on a what they call a continuing criminal enterprise crack cocaine distribution scheme out of North Philadelphia. And during sentencing of these individuals, who were probably most of them in their early 20s, I watched them being sentenced to decades in prison as a result of crack cocaine distribution, and the amount of crack cocaine was could fit on this end of the table. At the time, it saddened me to watch a waste of human potential in front of me go down. Some of those people are probably still in prison. However, at that time, I was kind of the mindset, well, you do the crime, you do the time. And nothing really changed that, except I had a discussion that summer with an assistant United States attorney who was transferring out of drug prosecution into environmental crimes. And he'd said to me that the war on drugs was stupid. Those were exact words. And I kind of discounted what he said in a way, but it was somebody I respected, so I filed it away. So years later, as a special agent working in Los Angeles back in 2002, 2003, we were working on an identity theft case that involved some elements of the Mexican mafia. And we had the occasion to, the investigation revealed that there was a link between these individuals in Santa Ana and some people in the Fresno area, so we ended up, make a long story short, executing a week's worth of search warrants up in the Fresno area and finding one location in a very nice residential neighborhood. We found almost $1 million in cash, almost $300,000 in a pickup truck located outside in the driveway, and 2 AK-47s. That is something that I had not dealt with ever, and we weren't prepared for that. What we figured out was that these individuals were using, setting up identities in the people whose identities they stole, and they would set up bank accounts to launder drug funds. That's one of the things they were doing. So at that time, it occurred to me that that drugs fueled and facilitated these non-drug related crimes. Shortly thereafter, I left the Office of Labor Racketeering. I now am a professor of criminal justice and legal studies at Chapman University, which is, well, Brandman University, which is part of Chapman University here in the Bay Area. I started doing, as the insanity of California's incarceration rate became apparent to me, and the effect on minority communities in particular really caught my attention. I started connecting this insanity to the drug prohibition policy that we have in place now. That research led me to LEAP. I'm a firm believer in that only legalization with the concomitant control and regulation can really reform, can really bring about true reform. What we have now is not only is it morally bankrupt, it's breaking our country financially. We have, in this country, just decided that it's okay to throw away immense amounts of human capital by criminalizing drug possession or drug distribution, and by prohibiting it, all we've done is tell criminals and organized crime in particular that you take this market, because the market's not going anywhere. Commodities such as marijuana, people want it. People are going to use it, and organized criminals are going to figure out a way to bring it into the country.
David, let me ask you a question.
Yes.
So most of the law enforcement within LEAP is retired. Is that correct? Or
within LEAP? I don't know the answer to that question. I think most probably would be former or retired law enforcement. And
so the big trick here is getting active law enforcement to side with this argument. How are we going to do that?
I think that let me have an aside here. I watched the Oaksterdam raids a couple of weeks ago, and I watched the DEA agents who primarily were there walking down the street after the raid was over, and people screaming at them, and I wondered what was going through their heads. I was wondering whether some of them knew what they were doing was futile and a waste of time. I suspected some of them did. I suspect some of them didn't. If they were brought up in any manner like I was, it's drummed into you that drugs are bad. It's the drug that is bad. It's not the prohibitionist policy that makes things bad. A coca leaf or a plant, a marijuana, plant, it doesn't cause people to kill each other. What causes people to kill each other are the policy that makes it illegal. And so people that are in the business of supply and production and distribution, if they have a dispute with each other, they kill each other. They don't go to court. They don't have contracts. So in answer to your question, I don't know if it's necessary to bring law enforcement, current law enforcement, along. I think the real answer is at the grassroots. Law enforcement will always be beholden to the powers that be. So I think in large amount, active law enforcement will be beholden if we look at the Occupy Oakland movement and behavior of the Oakland police. But if a grassroots effort is mounted, I do believe that that will get the attention of the politicians. Drug policy reform is not going to come from the federal government, certainly. It's not even going to come from the state government. It's certainly, I mean, we look at Obama. It's not going to come from him. He said he's open to a discussion about legalization. I don't believe that. As soon as the presidents down in Latin America started talking about legalization, they flew Joe Biden down to stop it. So it's a grassroots effort. I think the minority communities in particular need to really need to be convinced that legalization is a good thing and not a thing that will add disorder in those communities.
We're gonna go to Steve. I think we'll get back to you, but I think
Thank you.
A large part of law enforcement is about job retention and budget retention, and maybe we can get to that later. Steve?
Okay.
Thank you, David.
LEAP is an amazing organization. Thank you, David, leading the way. So let's see. We've got a little bit of a PowerPoint. Can we get that larger? And can you hear me? I think we need some volume.
He needs volume.
Hello. Hello, hello, hello. Okay, there we go. Much better. Okay, so if we could go to the first slide here. That would be the second slide then. Thank you. So we're going to talk about the path to legalization, and I'm going to walk through this pretty quickly because I want to get through all of it in 10 minutes. So in my opinion, the path to legalization is through wellness. Slide 2, please. Okay, well, he's getting slide 2 up there. So slide 2, the wellness strategy is based on my analysis of public opinion polls. Next slide, please. If you take a look, what you find is that about 50% of Americans support the legalization of cannabis for all purposes. Next slide. While 80% of Americans support medical cannabis. So what we see, next slide please, is that if you minus, it's kind of a strange statistic, right? Because it means that 30% of Americans say that they support medical cannabis, but they have reservations about legalizing cannabis, right? And those are our swing voters. If we win them over, we win the battle. And so that's who I think we need to focus on. Next slide, please. We need to win the support of these swing voters. We also need to deny their support to our opponents. And then ultimately what we need to do, the key to the path to legalization, is expanding that swing voter support from their support for medical to support for full access to cannabis for any purpose. So the swing voters are halfway there already. They understand that cannabis can be beneficial. They support some form of regulation because they already support a doctor's right to recommend, but they have reservations about legalization. I think that the source of those reservations come from the fact that any image they conjure of legalization is scary to them. Some of them actually think legalization means the cartels will be invited into their neighborhoods to sell weed and guns to kids on the way to school. Others have more reasonable concerns. They don't want their kids to walk into a 7-Eleven and walk past not only alcohol and tobacco, but also walk by the weed. They don't want to turn on the television and see commercials for cannabis. They're concerned that a system of legalization not lead their children into lifetimes of dependency. So what do we need to do? First, we need to take those swing voter concerns seriously. Sometimes they seem a little bit ridiculous, but we need to take them seriously and build systems of distribution that address those concerns. We need to build on their existing support for medical cannabis by creating responsible and regulated systems of distribution like we have done so effectively here in the Bay Area. Then we need to extend those models, Harborside, Berkeley Patients Group, Spark, Peace in Medicine, some of the outstanding examples of community-based cannabis distribution that we've pioneered here need to be extended across to every current medical cannabis state and ultimately across the United States. If we do that, if we create a well-regulated, responsible system of medical cannabis distribution across the country, we will be able to address the concerns of those swing voters. We will be able to present a model of cannabis distribution, legal cannabis distribution, that reassures them instead of scares them. Once we've accomplished that, once we have them at that point, then we advance scientific arguments about cannabis. We say, look, cannabis is safer than aspirin. Let's use the same standards that we use for any substance. Let's apply the same standard to all substances. So what do we know? We know that if aspirin is safe, so is cannabis, right? Aspirin kills 2,000 people in this country every single year. Cannabis, of course, has never killed anybody, ever. So the essence to this path to legalization, using wellness as a pathway to legalization, is that we have a retail network. It's already established across the country. It has reassured our fellow citizens that we can be trusted with what we are asking for, the responsibility that we're asking for. These shops will have demonstrated deep experience with cannabis and expertise in limited access to cannabis. Once that public trust is established, then we advance the scientific argument. Once the scientific argument is advanced, I'm confident that it can be won. And then we simply go to all of those existing facilities across the country and we flip the switch. They become adult full access facilities instead of medical cannabis facilities. That is my suggested and preferred strategy to get to legalization.
Steve, a lot of this is premised on a responsible model of distribution. Currently, our models of distribution are under attack and potentially being dismantled. So how does the current state of play into the strategy?
Well, we have to attack it from a couple of different directions. First of all, we need to police our own communities better. One of the reasons that the backlash that's going on now has been possible is because a lot of the people who have started distributing medical cannabis in California distributed it in a way that painted cannabis as an intoxicant, that presented cannabis as an intoxicant. The naughty nurses down on the boardwalk in Venice Beach do not help our cause at all. If we had instead rigorously portrayed cannabis as being a wellness product instead of an intoxicant, I don't think that our opponents would be anywhere near as able to do what they're doing today. Secondly, we need to continue, and not just continue, but redouble, and not just redouble, increase tenfold, and not just tenfold, 100-fold our efforts to bring pressure on the people who are bringing this campaign down upon us, and that is the prosecutors. There is no other class in America that's really still invested in this struggle, and so I think that what we need to do is shame them, and we need to bring the same kind of pressure that we brought to bear on legislators so effectively on the prosecutors themselves.
Great answer. Just really quickly, as Bill will be able to attest, prosecutors are pretty secluded and removed from the public. How do we get them?
Well, I think it'd be really interesting. We had about 20 patients in wheelchairs go down to the federal building and lock themselves to the doors. Be a good start.
That'll get their attention. All right, Bill, you want to weigh in?
Like to talk?
Yeah.
Okay. Hi, how's everybody doing today? I think most of you know me. My name's Bill Panzer. I'm an attorney. Been involved in cannabis reform for at least 25 years. Actually, before I was a lawyer, because I was also a musician. And gee, musicians and marijuana, I think there's a correlation there. One thing I can unfortunately report to you is that as of yesterday, it's definite that there will not be any legalization initiative on the California ballot this November. To make the November ballot, signatures had to be turned in by yesterday, and nobody could make it. We did have at least 3 competing legalization initiatives this year. I helped to co-write, along with Omar Figueroa and Joe Rogaway and Pebbles Trippett and Frank Lucido, the Repeal Cannabis Prohibition Act of 2012. Thank you. There's not a lot of difference in what we all want, the 3 different initiatives. The problem is that we need more unity. I think there's people involved in the movement that, they want to be on top, so they have to have their own initiative. Basically, my feeling is I don't give a damn who gets the credit for it as long as it gets done. And the other thing that I feel very strongly about is that the initiative itself has to be worded in a manner to make it bulletproof, because whatever we pass, whether it be the legislature or the people by initiative, eventually there's judges that are going to be interpreting it. And for the most part, these judges and the prosecutors and the police don't like us. They don't like medical cannabis. I mean, there is a prison industrial complex in this country. This country, we have 5% of the world's population. We have 25% of the world's prison population. And 65 to 75% of the people behind bars are there for drug or drug-related crime. Now that includes the guy who, steals your TV to buy the heroin, but if the heroin only costs 50 cents, he's not going to be stealing your TV to get it. Same thing. If you can't stand on the corner and make $500 a day, you're not going to have 14-year-old kids shooting each other with Uzis over who gets to stand on that corner. So it's important to realize that whatever we pass, it's going to be interpreted by people that are going to try and interpret it in a very different way than we see it. And that's the mistake I see with a lot of initiatives. For example, Prop 19. I have no doubt that Richard Lee intended the best for Prop 19. But Prop 19 set up a system where general state law outlawing cannabis remained in place, and local communities were authorized to opt out of general state law and legalize production and sales within that community. The problem with that, if they'd run that by someone like myself or Patrick or a criminal defense lawyer that works with this stuff regularly, is any of us would have told him the state constitution specifically says that local communities are not allowed to opt out of state law. So if 19 had passed, likely a judge would have looked at that and said, well, that part's unconstitutional. And we would have completely lost that. There is one initiative right now, the Jack Herrera initiative, the CCHHI, I think it's called. Yeah, the California Cannabis, Hemp, and Health Initiative, which they have until June to get signatures for the 2014 ballot. But problem with that one, that initiative says that it repeals all laws that are in conflict with the initiative, but it doesn't identify what those laws are. So it leaves it up to a judge to decide whether or not a particular cannabis law is repealed or not. Personally, I don't trust the judges to do that. So what we attempted to do with Repeal Cannabis Prohibition Act, and we are going forward toward 2014, the group is called Sensible California. What we said is, you know what? You want to repeal prohibition? You do it by repealing prohibition. You don't do it by leaving laws on the books that say it's illegal and then write exceptions. You repeal the laws. Plus, that helps with the problem of federal preemption. What we're seeing is that the feds are coming in areas where there's regulation, and they're saying, wait a minute, federal law preempts your local regulation under the concept of obstacle preemption. It's kind of this legal fiction, this kind of amorphous idea whereby the feds say, we can stomp on you, state guys. We don't care about your regulations. We're going to come in and stop. And for instance, up in Mendocino, Mendocino put in a marvelous system where your medical cannabis, you go to the sheriff, you register, you buy zip ties, little plastic ties that go around the plant. And as long as you got zip ties on your plant, you're safe. Great system. The feds went up to Mendocino and they went to the Board of Supervisors and the sheriffs and they said, hey, we stop doing this program or we're going to indict all of you on a marijuana conspiracy. And so Mendocino stopped doing the program. Well, if we repeal all our laws, there's no law that says the federal government, the state government has to mirror federal laws. California doesn't have to make cannabis illegal. At the end of alcohol prohibition, for example, New York repealed all of their state alcohol prohibition laws. And they turned to the feds and they said, we're getting out of the prohibition business. You want to stop the guy down the street corner from drinking a beer? Feds, you come in and do it. We're out of that business. We ain't doing it no more. And the feds didn't have the manpower, the money, the resources to go in and bust the guy drinking beer on the street corner. Same thing here. The feds will always have the money and the power and resources to come down on someone like Richard Lee or Big Rose and all that. But they don't have it to go after everybody. So if California were to repeal our prohibition, it would be up to the feds. So what we did in the Repeal Prohibition Act is we essentially repealed all the laws against cannabis, but the laws against commercial production and sales were repealed 6 months after passage. It authorized the legislature to create the California Cannabis Commission, and they had 6 months to come up with reasonable regulations. Now the beauty of this is if the feds don't like the regulations and they want to come in under preemption, then we revert to the tomato model. Cannabis is as legal as tomatoes. And then the feds have to do all of the enforcement, which they're not ready to do. So under that situation, they would probably stand back and let us have reasonable regulation. Now another thing we did is we empowered the California Cannabis Commission that they could regulate production and sales, but they could not put any regulations in for amounts of up to 100 square feet of canopy or up to 3 pounds per person. It's kind of like with beer or wine. You know, you can make wine in your basement and you can make up to, I think it's up to about 100 gallons. And no regulations. You want to go over that, you got to go get permits, you have to pass health inspections, things like that. Well, we thought the same thing with cannabis. Everybody should be allowed to grow 100 square feet, have 3 pounds without any interference from the government at all. So that's what we put in there. What we're hoping is that for 2014, that we can sit down with the Regulate Marijuana Like Wine people and the CCHHI people and everybody in this movement, and let's put together a tight, good initiative for legalization. One that protects the rights of the people, protects the rights of the patients, but that also will be bulletproof so that the judges can't interpret it contrary to what our intent is. And one other thing I want to talk about is unfortunately what I've been seeing a lot lately is there's a perception within the movement that the medical people are against legalization. I talk to people back east, and they're all convinced that Prop 19 failed because the medical community in California came out and voted against it. That's just not true. I mean, yes, were there some growers up north who make a fortune because this is black market that like to keep it that way? Sure, there's some of that going on. But there are also many patients who felt threatened by Prop 19 that it potentially could be interpreted to restrict patient rights. Personally, I agree with that. I think that was the problem. So any legalization initiative has to protect patients' rights, has to do it clearly. I believe that the medical people and the legalization people can and should work together hand in hand. And we should resist this idea that there's a schism between medical and full legalization, because there is not that schism. We all want the same thing, which is personal freedom. If I want to use cannabis to help me get to sleep, I should be able to do that. If I want to use cannabis because I'm going to go play music and it feels better, I should be able to do that. We've got the people. The people are on our side. The politicians will follow. We have to keep plugging along. This November, keep an eye on Colorado and Washington State. They both have legalization initiatives on the ballot. Now, they're flawed. They're baby steps, you know, up to 1 ounce, things like that. The Washington one, there's a lot of people are against it because it has a per se DUI limit. If you have 5 nanograms per liter in your blood of THC, if you test for that, you're DUI, just like over 0.08 alcohol. Many patients will have more than that and not be impaired.
Bill, really...
Thankfully, I was going to say in California, a bill was introduced recently to give us a per se DUI limit. That has now been changed. That is not now pending here in California.
One question.
Yeah.
What's the strategy to raising sufficient funds to get an initiative on the ballot in 2014?
Well, it's difficult. There's been traditional funders, George Soros, Peter Lewis, Peter Sperling, that essentially have funded all these initiatives around the country. They want to see polling. They want to see that the initiative at the early stages is polling at least 60%. And if it's not polling at least 60%, they can't touch it. So, Sensible California, we're going to be starting raise funds to get up about $40,000 initially just to do some initial polling. But I believe also in the internet era, things can change. And I think that we could do an initiative in this state without having to rely on George Soros. I mean, my God, if everybody who bought medicine, who bought cannabis, for every $100 they spend, put $1 into the political arena, we'd be celebrating, you know, on Wednesday, the day after Election Day in 2014, easily in this state for legalization. You know, we have to get motivated. We have to get people motivated and get them political and get them to contribute. And just keep talking about it. Just keep talking to your friends. Keep explaining to people. Yesterday I did the Len Tillum show on the radio, and a guy called up complaining about his 14-year-old who became addicted to marijuana and had to go to rehab and all this, and how terrible it is. And I said to him, I said, that's because your 14-year-old could buy it. If it was legal and it was regulated, your 14-year-old wouldn't be able to buy it. Just like, you know, a 12-year-old in this country can get a hold of a bag of weed easier than they get a bottle of Jack Daniels. You want to keep it away from the kids, regulate it, make them show ID to buy it instead of buying it, you know, in the alley behind the school. So come to events like this, tell your friends, talk to the people around you. You know, the beauty of medical cannabis is that it has taken the demonization out of cannabis. People who were never exposed to it before 1996 now have been around it. You know, Aunt Betty's using it and she didn't turn into a junkie. Uncle Fred's using it, he can see better, and hey, he's more fun to be around too. You know, they're seeing that it's not the evil, terrible weed. You know, things like Weed Wars. You know, I was talking with Steve, to me the best part of that show was when the patients told their stories. You know, the guy with the kid that was like, the cannabis made a difference in his life. The lady in the wheelchair. This is what it's about. I mean, it's an incredible medicine, and it's an incredibly safe substance. And if we're going to be pushing cigarettes and we're going to be pushing alcohol, let people smoke. Not to mention Tim Lincecum with the Giants. Let Timmy smoke. He's going to pitch much better.
Right on.
Thank you.
Thanks, Phil. All right, Dan, what's Labor's take on our path forward?
Well, I'd just like to say to our LEAP brother, we're guilty of snacketeering in UFCW. We eat a lot of snacks. Hi, everybody. My name's Dan. I'm an alcoholic. Oh, wrong meeting. So, I'm the toddler here. I'm, you know, 3 years old in this movement, in this industry, and I'm, you know, honored and, you know, flabbergasted to be here with a couple of my heroes, a couple of real cannabis warriors that started it, have kept it going, and have blazed a trail for all of us, and thank you. And organizations like LEAP and your folks are bringing credibility. And it's a perfect example. Can you give me some sound, please? Oh, okay. It's kind of like standing behind my wife. I can't hear how loud I am. So my wife's a wonderful woman. Just ask her. But what I did do before I came to cannabis is, and as Patrick said, I was a special operations director for Local 5, which is the third largest local union in the nation, statewide. Actually, it's a tri-state local union. And so all I did in Local 5 was work on statewide ballots, and that meant the constitutional officers, governor, lieutenant governor, attorney general, any statewide ballot measure or initiative. And the reason that that's important is because in the statewide political industry, as we refer to it, it's a very specialized field, and it's a very specialized approach. And it's an approach that you take either for statewide or also national. Many people that work in the statewide political industry also are operatives in the federal process, but predominantly will stay in the statewide process. Initiatives take a particular approach, and in our case, we kind of have, and typically initiatives will cover two types of issues. You'll have a social issue that has no economy built into it, like the LGBT movement, and traditionally we'll call those movements, and that's a movement that doesn't have an economy built into it, but rather is pushed by a grassroots, social, passionate sort of, you know, a will of the people wants to make things right. Then you have industry initiatives that have economies built into the industries, and the industry is then gonna drive and thrive. It's gonna create tax income. It's gonna create jobs. It's gonna fuel the economy, and so there are different approaches. So when I saw cannabis, and I saw Prop 19, and I was the Labor and Coalitions Director on Prop 19, and I'm the guy that brought the labor movement into the cannabis process. We all just Thank you. We all just saw the Washington State AFL-CIO endorse the Washington Initiative day before yesterday. That was some of our work. In California on Prop 19, we saw SEIU, the largest union in the world, endorse Prop 19. We saw the Longshore, we saw UFCW in all its forms, up to the Western States Council, the Painters Union. And so when you're dealing with an issue, with an industry, with an initiative that has an economy built into it, the thing you want to do is you want to build coalitions. That's how you get an initiative passed. That's how you raise money for an initiative. That's why we need George Soros's money. And I believe everybody here knows that many of us worked on the Unity Coalition. Steve and I worked closely on it. We all worked closely to develop the Unity Coalition, bringing all the different factions of the movement and the industry together, because historically, as Bill pointed out, sometimes there hasn't been a real connect between the movement and the industry. And when I say movement, now I'm talking about legalization, which is predominantly a movement now because there is no industry built into it, although an initiative like Bill's does develop an industry which has an economy. It is much easier to get to where you're going by initiative when there's an economy built into it. So what we've been doing is we've been kind of struggling along trying to use the economy of the medical cannabis industry and the momentum of the legalization movement and kind of, you know, bring that to the surface. And we did pretty well. And, you know, with our Regulate, Control, and Tax Medical Marijuana Act, the initiative that we did not make it to the ballot, and thanks to some billionaires that said they were going to do something they didn't do, we were still able to raise about $1,200,000, and we're using that money now for legislation.
Is that the Amiano bill? That's
the Amiano bill, which is actually just a rewrite of Medical Marijuana Regulation, Control, and Taxation Act.
I want to ask you another question. What's it going to take, and what involvement can the labor unions have in breaking through the Beltway that has seemingly been impervious to, you know, the majority opinion in this country, and actually get some hearings in D.C.?
So that's where we use coalition building, and rather than hit the streets and try and educate the public, it's very difficult to do that. An approach that we use in the statewide political industry, the coalition builder is the mind. That's the person that has the ability to get the cops and the unions and the hospitals and the firefighters and the nurses and you know, whoever else all on the same page on something is the person that has the mind to get things done. So when you are building those coalitions, and that's what I do, I build coalitions. And as you build a coalition, what you're doing is you're also building a community that you can educate. Now see, I can go stand on a corner and hold up a sign that says truck drivers are cool. Or I can go down to the Teamsters and I can say, hey, I got this program here and it's going to teach truck drivers to be cool. And then maybe people will see truck drivers are cool and then they'll catch on. So, and that's the approach you take. You go to the public employees and say, hey, you guys are hurting for tax money because you're public employees and you get paid by the public rolls. So let's find a way to raise taxes. That's how we brought Prop 19, got SEIU to endorse Prop 19. So to answer your question, the thing you do is you find the communities, the coalitions, the organizations that represent the people that you can best affect with your message. And you reach out to those organizations, trickle down the information, trickle down the education. It also, when you deal with organizations, then you're dealing directly with public officials and elected officials because they seek their endorsements. So if Patrick, if you're the governor and I want you to sign my bill, I don't ask you to sign my bill. I'll go talk to everybody else around you that's endorsed you, that you're scared to death will not endorse you next time, and I go tell them to tell you to sign my bill. Right? Now we endorsed SB 676. Hold on, the hemp bill.
The hemp bill?
Yeah, we endorsed 676, and we worked together on that, and we did a process of calling. You know this. I mean, you call legislators, you talk to them, you tell them what you want, and if you can't get to the legislature, the legislators, then you go to their funding people, and you tell their funders, hey, you know, they're not doing the right thing. So. To answer your question, the way we break through the Beltway is first, whatever happens in California happens in the rest of the nation. So we can't quite get it done in California right now. And as Bill pointed out, we got Colorado and Washington that do seem to be moving forward. And Steve, I think, has been looking at my laptop when I'm not in the office because your numbers are identical. But then again, we worked together on the coalition. We had the same polling there, right? So, I mean, those numbers are it. And we've been polling around the nation, not just in California, not just in Fresno, or just not in San Francisco. You don't want to poll there. As a matter of fact, if you want to know what's really going on, you go to Iowa and ask them what the hell is going on there. you get your low poll. You go to New York, you get your high poll, and then you do your Greenberg shoot 'em down poll. And that's the poll that says, yeah, well, we did get 78%. You go raise money with that poll, and then you do your shoot 'em down, and you find out what they're going to say when all the arguments are presented against you.
All right, Dan.
So what all this leads up to, Patrick, we got to go step by step. Like Steve pointed out, we got to start with medical, which we're doing. We got to shore that up. We got to bring in some good components. And I'm sorry, and don't throw any rocks, we got to stop using the word legalization.
Well, we got to stop using the word marijuana as well.
Steve hit the word right on the regulation. Alcohol is not legal. It is regulated, controlled, and taxed. It is not legal. And, you know, we've got to talk about repealing prohibition, like Bill points out. We've got to use the particular message that works. Otherwise, we're confusing people. When you say legalization, it's a negative term. Build the coalitions, get together with other people, talk to people you wouldn't talk to normally. Reach across the aisle and shake hands with the dispensary across the street and the patient down the road. That's how we're going to get there, is by unity and sticking together and fighting step by step.
Thanks, Dan. All right, we want to open
and joining the union, sorry. Join the union and everything will be legal. I promise.
So we want to open up to question and answer.
Legally regulated.
That's right.
Testing. Hello. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes.
My name is Sam Clowder. I raised and spent several $1 million from 2000 to 2004 to put Prop 66 on the 2004 ballot. I don't mean to throw qualifications, but that's more successful experience than sits on the podium. My concern is what's going to happen in the future, and I thought that's what this is discussed, charting the path forward. There will be no chance to pass an initiative in 2014 because you cannot bring the voters to the ballot box. What you can do is educational campaigns, which can raise the profile of support. And that's what we need to concentrate on. One of the biggest problems that we've had in this movement is everyone's backbiting. Any one of us goes on DPFCA and sees, you might speak nice to each other here and out there, but then you go online and you kill each other. That will not build a movement. We have to have cooperation instead of competition. Now, what I would like to know is just how much we're all going to work together from here on out. Because I know 2014, there's not a chance to pass an initiative. 2016 is the next year, and that's what we all need to focus on. But I will speak, not for anyone else here or in the movement, but for all the professionals in politics that I know, and I will tell you the reason they don't come and get involved and raise funds or run campaigns is because of the backbiting here and because of the general impression legalizing marijuana is just to smoke it. The message is simple, and this is what it is.
Let me get a
the message is simple, and this is what it is. Repealing cannabis prohibition will improve the quality of life for all Americans. That's the bottom line, gentlemen. And if you can't get together in private, you shouldn't pretend you can get together in public.
I'd also like to hear Steve respond to that.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Dan.
Hey, Sam, those are great points. And by the way, I've never had a negative encounter with Bill or Steve and we've just met, brother, and the Department of Labor racketeering. Thank God. And Patrick's only yelled at me 2 or 3 times. But you're right. There's a lot of backbiting. There's a lot of backstabbing. There's a lot of discontent. There's a lot of, I'm a consultant, and if I'm not making any money on it, it's wrong, it's all bad. But I don't say that. I'm a consultant and I'm not making money on it, and that's why I don't like it. So we do have to get together. And we've got folks here that didn't talk before, never worked together before. And 2016 may be the year, but it doesn't mean we stop now. It means that we work on things like legislation. It means we work on things like coalition building. We keep the momentum and the movement alive. Thank you.
Steve?
So, you know, when I started in this movement almost 40 years ago, we were a small movement, almost isolated movement. There weren't that many of us. We could fit in a room about this size or a little bit larger. We could talk out all of our issues. We could discuss strategies, and we could agree on something. unity wasn't so much of a challenge then. Today, we're a much more mature movement. We are a much larger movement. We have many more strategies in our toolbox. The fact that we had 3 different initiatives advanced in California is an indication of this. The fact that there's lots of other models of initiatives across the country that are going on the ballot is another indication. What's important, I think, is that, first of all, we do debate our strategy vigorously. Let's not be afraid of that. Let's debate and let's make sure that we have a good discussion so that we can come to good solutions, to good strategies. But then, ultimately, some of us, some of the time, and probably all of us some of the time, are going to lose that internal debate. And when we do, we need to enthusiastically embrace the strategy of our fellow activists. Can't think of an initiative anywhere on the ballot that's attached to cannabis this year that I happily wouldn't happily go into the booth and vote in favor of. Now, there's probably 1 or 2 that I would favor over the other ones, but I think that it's important that we support each other's efforts, that we always assume best intentions on each other's part, and that we do strive for that unity, which ultimately is what's going to allow us to be successful.
You know, Sam, I think one thing that we need to do is all of us need to pull our heels a little bit out of those pits where we've dug our heels in and be a little more open-minded. You know, when you start out with, it's impossible in 2014, it can't happen, it's impossible, and that's it. You know, well, let me finish. You don't leave, you know, everybody takes attitudes like that, everybody digs their heels in, we ain't gonna work together. Now, I know you have a great history, Sam, and you know a lot of what you're talking about, and I have a lot of respect for the experience you have. And I think you have a lot to bring to the table. And there certainly are very good arguments against bringing an initiative in, you know, in an off-presidential year. But I think all of us need to put our preconceptions aside a little bit and bring all of our experience and our thoughts together, and you know, if somebody's correct, they'll convince the other people, but we have to be a little more open-minded.
Here, here.
Diplomacy.
Yeah. I'm Dr. Larry, and I'll predict in 2014 you will see 1 for sure and possibly 2 initiatives. I believe that the California Medical Association will sponsor an initiative to regulate medicinal marijuana. The executive director, Dustin Cochran, told me that on Tuesday. If I have anything to say about it, and I do have input sitting on, is there will be 2 initiatives, 1 on medicinal marijuana and 1 on adult usage, because I think they're completely different uses. One should be regulated by ABC and the other one by Consumer Affairs. And if you gather the signatures for 2 of them at the same time, it's going to cost you, it's not going to cost twice this amount. And I believe that's what you'll see. And I think they'll be sponsored by California Medical Association and the California Society of Addiction Medicine.
All right, thank you. Do you have a question?
Yeah. Hi, I'm Craig Carroll from Humboldt County. I wanted to speak to the representative from LEAP, that's David Long. What is your response from fellow peace officers in terms of your program with prohibition, with repealing it, with active as well as retired officers?
Well, as far as retired officers or former officers, the response is amazingly positive. As far as current officers, there's a debate. There's a real debate. I think my sense is there's a lot of ego involved. I mean, if you having a debate with a current law enforcement officer who's got 15 or 20 years in on the job, and you're essentially telling them what they're doing or and have been doing is a waste of time. I mean, I wouldn't say it like that, but to convince somebody. But if they're smart enough, they kind of pick up on that. There's a real resistance, aside from the resistance of possibly being an outcast in your current position. Yeah.
You want to come up to the mic? Or just speak loud. So you're talking about capital investment?
Well, you know, it's true that there was some nascent interest on Wall Street. I myself made a couple of trips up there and met with some people. Just prior to Prop 19, there was a bit of a feeding frenzy, and some of the more adventurous hedge fund managers and some of the smaller hedge funds and equity funds did take a look at investing in cannabis. All of them, without exception, that I know about, have been scared away by the recent actions of the federal government, not just in California, but in many states, not just by the Department of Justice, but by many agencies. In general, I think that we're not going to see really large and significant investment in the industry until two things happen. One, until you see a for-profit industry, and two, until you see a change in federal law. Until then, you're not going to see a lot of really significant amounts of investment capital coming into the industry. Would it be a good thing? Well, to the degree that those guys aren't going to jump in until it's fairly safe, I think that them jumping in is a sign of progress. One thing is for sure, very few things happen in the United States without the involvement and the blessing of the investor class in this country. So I think that we're not going to win until we do get those guys on our side. That said, we don't just want to create a new industry. We want to create a new kind of industry. We want to make sure that the lessons that this plant teaches us are incorporated into that industry, lessons about responsibility, about compassion, about generosity, about nature. So it's going to be a struggle to maintain those principles, but I think it's very important that we do.
You know, I think there's many of us, and I'd probably include myself in this, that would love to see the 60s hippie kind of model. You know, free cannabis for everybody. You go into the store, they give it away for free, no money involved, socialism, blah, blah, blah. The reality is, we live in the United States, it's a capitalist country, and there's going to be money involved. There is going to be regulation, whether we like it or not. So it seems to me that the best way to go about this is if we present regulatory schemes, starting out with medical. You know, people are lazy. The legislators are lazy. They'd much rather take something that's already there and tweak it than start from scratch and reinvent the wheel. So if we put our model there to be tweaked, we're going to have a lot more say into what eventually happens.
We got to close it up, like really quick.
Just really quickly. So, you know, UFCW is an international union. We have 1,400,000 members around the world. We're the largest international union that does the industries we do: retail, agriculture, food processing, textiles. To answer your question, so we've just seen 22 licenses purchased by a hedge fund in Colorado last week. And these are licenses that were defunct and belonged to companies that either had gone out of business or had been legislated out of business. And so I agree with Steve that they're not really serious. But on the other hand, it's something to look out for, because we are dedicated to the cottage industry and keeping the folks that started this alive in it. There's also a company called GW Pharmaceuticals that we are tracking very closely, and their issues are extracting CBDs, CBAs, growing cannabis, but throwing away the plant and the THC and just extracting these other items. And so we're tracking that.
Okay, guys, we gotta close it up. Thank you so much.
Would it be possible for me to ask one last question?
We're kind of beyond our time.
I'm kind of an anarchist anyway, so if you wouldn't mind, I just want to ask if you gentlemen are aware of the executive order that Obama signed on March 16th, identifying hemp as a strategic resource available by essential civilian demand.
I haven't heard about that, but I want to talk to you offline.
Okay.
So I'd be really interested to talk to you about that. We got to close up.
All right.
Thank all the panelists. Wonderful discussion. Thank you.